As much of a sightseeing simulator as it was a riveting puzzle game, Portal 2 was more than just crossing emancipation grills and ripping holes in the space-time continuum. This game dug into extraordinary depths and impressed many people with its suggestive humor and scintillating dialogue. But amidst the jokes and jests, the facilities of Aperture have no shortage of bizarre Easter eggs and references that may make you jump or wince. Here are 8 you may recognize. The story of Doug Rattmann follows an insane scientist that hid beneath the panels of the building, while GLaDOS, a rogue AI, slaughtered everyone in the facility. If you're a natural explorer, you won't have much trouble finding the 7 dens he has taken refuge in during the catastrophe. Each den seems to get a little creepier than the previous, but one specific den contains peculiar radio with a signal that can be decoded. The den is located in the 6th chamber. Fire a portal across from the den so you can take the momentum of the catapults into the area. You'll find the radio, as well as the achievement entitled Final Transmission. Snag yourself a decoding software, and the radio's wave frequency will become a piece of static imagery on the screen, revealing an Aperture watermark, a companion cube that Rattmann likely got a little too attached to, and what looks to be a hunched-over figure in the background, possibly Rattmann himself? The sentience of AIs are a recurring motif in Aperture, GLaDOS of course being the greatest example, but if you listen a little more attentively, some of the turrets may have a few things to say to you. I'm not talking about hitting a few impressive notes either. The redemption line contains a sentient turret with the mind of a prophet, constantly reiterating the fact that it feels different and out of line. Pick up the turret and it will thank you for supposedly rescuing it from the redemption line. Don't pass through the emancipation grill just yet, or you'll miss out on a couple clues as to how the rest of your adventure will pan out.
Prometheus was punished by the gods for giving the gift of knowledge to man. He was cast into the bowels of the earth and picked by birds.
In only a few seconds, the turret has revealed the true identity of GLaDOS, being Caroline, and has anticipated Wheatley's betrayal, and GLaDOS being pecked by birds later in the game as a clever parallel to the Greek mythos. I feel like we're missing out on something. Wonder what else this little prophet can do. GLaDOS's congruence to the Greek allegory of Prometheus is ripe with symbolism, from falling down the pit to the wild crow pecking inquisitively at the potato. Let's look at the correlations. Of course, we've already mentioned how GLaDOS being pecked by the crow is a symbolic parallel to the punishment Prometheus was given after his crimes against Olympus, in which his intestines would be pecked out by crows every day, only for them to reform and be eaten. It's also imperative to know the significance behind your fall. Prometheus fell 1 mile into the pit of Tartarus before being subject to his punishment that we've already covered. Try to take a close look at the walls during your plummet. There are measurements that go by the increment of meters in depth. It's a bit of a long shot, but could it be a reasonable presumption that the distance you fall is the same as that of the Greek traitor Prometheus? Oh, and in case there wasn't enough evidence for you, may I direct your attention to the label at the top of the ruin saying Tartarus. Yeah. GLaDOS doesn't have a lot of compassionate bones in her body, and that alone is evidenced by her distasteful sense of humor and how much she taunts Shell with opportunities to escape. But I think the red flag finally rose high enough when we heard Wheatley's remark towards GLaDOS releasing toxins into the facility.
Bring your daughter to work day. That did not end well.
Of all the days she could have picked from a hat to decide to commit mass murder on, she picked the day that she knew would result in, well, the highest body count. Even if that meant adding a few children into the mix. On Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, plenty of parents found themselves strangled and poisoned by the neurotoxins released into the atmosphere. And she knew that they wouldn't be able to resist coming to work that day because of their daughter's desire to show off their badass science experiments. You can actually find Shell's potato experiment in this room as well. It isn't hard to find at all, seeing as how the experiment itself is growing into the ceiling. But the little byline that suggests the project was made by Shell is practically hidden by the size of the experiment. Rewinding back to the beginning of the game for a minute, Portal ensures the player that they have precisely no time to grow accustomed to their environment before throwing Easter eggs at them. Even at the very beginning of the game, when you wake up in confinement, there are still a couple you could easily miss. The test subjects holed up in neighboring cells are visible once the walls start to deteriorate, and they have tags labeled by their cells. It looks like an identification tag. The system is able to discern the gender, weight, and age of the test subject just by simply reading the tag, and there's one on every single cell too, or at least every cell the game allows you to see during your brief time of imprisonment. But there's something a little more disturbing printed on the label. Is that an expiration date? What might this mean? The subjects might be executed after a certain time of being mentally stagnant. After all, being holed up in your cell certainly can drain you. I believe the reference with the most popularity might be the stark, horrific symbolism behind GLaDOS's physical form, theorized to represent the form of a woman being unwillingly bound. People have speculated that this may suggest something about how Caroline was presumably forced into the machine by Cave Johnson and his employees for the sake of furthering science and knowledge. Caroline, the bound slave of Aperture. She's likely had plenty of reasonable fears about having her consciousness transferred into a machine, hence the symbolism of Caroline's physical appearance. That colossal metal monster has become a mental prison for Caroline, and she even makes remarks that she can still feel her presence somewhere in that titanium casing of hers. When in her potato form, she's more susceptible to emotional experiences, which is shown by her lamenting song and her reaction to Cave Johnson's announcements. Remember a couple numbers ago when I made a remark towards Portal's lack of patience for people with no attention to detail? Well, let's clear that up a little more. When in your testing cell, there's nothing much to do other than to simply follow along with the story and anxiously wait for the plot to thicken. But after you are given a brief overview of the controls, you do fall back asleep, as Shell awakens her cell is much more dilapidated than before. When Wheatley knocks, take a look around before answering the door. The painting on the wall has changed from a vibrant daylight to a somber moon gleaming behind the mountain. The mural behind the fridge has changed as well. What was once a happier man is now slouched over with his face buried in his hands. That's not even half of it. The fridge is also rusted over, the lamp on the side of the bed is tilted, and the intercom you hear at the beginning is noticeably broken. Doug Rattmann certainly is an interesting character to research. His apprehensive presence grows increasingly noticeable as Shell makes her way through the descending chambers and Aperture laboratories. But what if I told you that the character is actually in the game? In fact, he's a lot closer to you than you think. Let's take a look at the 7th and final den in the game. Take the light bridge up to the broken panel in the 17th chamber. You'll know when you find it. Like the rest of his dens, they are secluded, and with scrambled illustrations of various happenings in the game. The very last sketch seems rushed. It's a drawing of Shell, asleep in her chamber. Get closer to the sketch and put an ear to the wall, and you can hear something. Rattmann is repeating the same deranged chant, referring to Shell, the Borealis ship in Half-Life, and the hidden human side of GLaDOS. Exit the panel from where you came in, and the panel will close behind you, cutting off access to the room, almost as though Rattmann detected an intruder in the den and locked it all down. How close was he to you exactly? It's pretty creepy to think about. The facilities of Aperture are ripe with detail and depth, but with your help, we might just be able to pick this place clean. We have something else for you right here. All you have to do is hop in. We'll see you there.